I'm Mark Pattison, Chair of the Cemetery Board, representing Rosanna Rosato. This is a special meeting. We're trying to get some extra vandalism things done before the end of the fiscal year. So we've dispensed with some of the division report and the legal report, and we'll just do the actual applications. Just a reminder, we're doing this remotely pursuant to the governor's executive order. Tony can, make sure we're all on the same page on that. I know that order was extended again. Again, it's being recorded. It's helpful if you can mute your line when you're not speaking. When you are speaking, please try to identify yourself. That's helpful for our minutes and our record. During the public session, again, Tony will explain the rules there, but certain folks who are lobbyists, others have to identify themselves before they speak in public session. Again, I think this is going to be a pretty short meeting. We have one application and 3 vandalism applications. And Louis, are we going to do the vandalism ones first, or how do you want to do this?
So I probably should actually, even though it's not on the agenda, give the board a very brief update on something that happened. They probably read about it in the press anyway. And then I think we should do the vandalisms first. Okay.
So go ahead.
Real quick, as I think everybody who's in the Department of State on this call knows,
I could interrupt briefly.
Yeah.
We usually do the explanation of how we're meeting, how we're complying with it.
Oh, sorry, you do that, please.
Tony, thank you for keeping us on track.
You're right.
Go ahead, Tony. Go ahead, Tony.
Right. So we are meeting pursuant to Governor's Executive Order 202.1. Article 7 of the Public Offices Law is modified to permit any public body to meet and take action without permitting in-person access to meetings, to authorize such meetings to be held remotely by conference call or similar service, provided that the public has the ability to view or listen to such proceeding and that such meetings are recorded and later transcribed. This executive order has been interpreted to suspend the requirement that board members be physically convened or convened by video conference, and to suspend the requirement that notice of the meeting include the physical location of each board member. We've given the public notice of the meeting and how to attend by video conference or by telephone conference, and the board agenda and board material have been placed on the Division of Cemeteries website. We are taking attendance, giving your name and who you represent is voluntary unless you are a lobbyist, then you must identify yourself and your client. We ask that anyone who speaks to the board identifies themselves. And as Mark noted, this is a special meeting called under Section 1504, which may be called at the request of the chair. That's it.
Thank you, Tony. And thank you again for keeping us on the straight and narrow. Just reminding people, if you're not speaking, please mute your phone. Louis, you had something you wanted to update the board on?
Yeah. As everyone at the Department of State here already knows, and probably some of you might have seen in the press reports, there was a tragedy at Washington Memorial Park, which is also known as Cemetery Gardens in Suffolk County. A grounds crew member was killed by a grave cave-in. We don't have much by the way of facts on this, and I know there are various I know that OSHA was at the site and the local police were at the site, and we were waiting further information. The cemetery briefly suspended all operations. They are back in operation. They're catching up in various. I'll give, since I do this pretty much every time I speak, I'll give you the cremation numbers, which are they're the small delay in cremations we were seeing in New York City has gotten smaller. And across the state, cremation numbers are more or less holding steady or declining as of right now. And those are just all I had.
All right, thank you. Okay, we have 3 vandalism proposals, and I'll take them as they are on the agenda. North Ottawa Cemetery in Cattaraugus County in the amount of $29,152. I think it is a dangerous monument application. Does somebody want to give us some information on that? Someone from the division want to report?
This is Mike Seelman with the division.
Go ahead.
It's a North Ottawa Cemetery had 24 hazardous monuments. I went out and inspected them. And I noted that in fact they appeared to be hazardous. The cemetery had attempted to come up with 2 bids. They initially thought they had 2 bids. One of the contractors backed out. So they are left with 1 bid for $28,945 to repair the 24 monuments. I did the calculation on the last 10 estimates that were approved for hazardous monuments in Western New York and came up with this bid being on the high side of the average. The average price of the low bid, which was $1,085 per monument. The average high was $1,279 per monument. This bid is actually $1,206. I don't really have any other information on this other than that I recommended the approval.
Okay. Tony, did you have any issues you wanted to raise with this application? Tony?
You're muted.
Sorry about that. This dates back to June of last summer. That's when the low bidder dropped out, leaving only the high bidder. The effort to find bids was at the initial phase. They asked, my understanding from reading the report of division, they asked 5 places to give a bid, only those 2 gave a bid. And when the low bidder dropped out, they didn't reach out to any further monument companies. So that's my concern is, you know, from June to now, they've had plenty of time to reach out after the low bid dropped out. And I was hoping that someone from the cemetery be here to provide information on were there other companies they could have reached out to once that low bidder dropped out.
Okay.
I am here. I'm president of the North Ottawa Cemetery. My name is Keith Carini.
Well, go ahead, Keith. Thank you for being here.
That isn't quite accurate, what you said. I took this job in 2018, and I started out with a company in Forestville who came out. Riles and Woolley is the name of the funeral home. He actually went through the whole thing and provided me some paperwork, and I didn't hear from him for quite some time. I finally got back. I got some background noise here. He finally got back to me after being prompted by someone else who wanted them to do some work for a relative in the cemetery, and indicated that his partner had left him and that he could not do the job. I then, so that was how it started. I then reached out to, and you have to understand where we're located. First of all, it is very rural. There's not exactly a whole lot of places around here that do this kind of work. In fact, as it turns out, I only found one. I then reached out to Crandall Monuments in Olean. Unfortunately, after 4 or 5 phone calls, I kept leaving messages and they never returned my call. I then reached out to a company in Arcade called W.S. Davis, of which I provided that paperwork. And they kind of went through and gave a vague estimate of what it would be. And then I got a letter from a guy named Dave Kibler, who said that in fact, a letter was provided. I'm looking at it right now. And they did not have the equipment for such a large job. So I then even reached out one step further to one other place, and I kind of, in Springville, New York, Wise Mail, and they did not do that kind of work. Somehow or another, I heard about this Western New York place that I finally did get the bid from. I think that was in consultation with someone from the East Ottawa Cemetery, and they did follow through. I met him at the cemetery, and he went through the whole thing, and that's the bid you have in front of you. And it's, I kind of called everybody that I could think of or that I knew about within a reasonable distance of the cemetery, which is in a very remote area, by the way. And I did the best I could. I just couldn't find anybody else, and either didn't do the work. Like I said, it wasn't for lack of trying. And I understand that, you know, you like to have two bids, but I did the best. I did the best I could.
Sounds like you did. At least I don't know if anybody else has any questions for Keith.
Actually, if I could follow up, sir, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. Is it Keith?
Yes.
Hi. So we're in the process of writing regulations to deal with this issue, so it would help me to understand a little bit more about what the process is like for cemeteries. My understanding is most cemeteries have rules and regulations about what monuments can go in. So before a monument is installed after death, the proposed monument goes to the cemetery, they review it, and they approve it or don't approve it. Is that kind of what happens with your cemetery?
Well, yes. I'm rather new at this, though, sir. I've one individual had this job for several years and passed away.
Okay.
And we only have we have me and a vice president, a secretary, and also a treasurer. And we did increase our board to, of course, we haven't met ever since this COVID thing, but we did get some more board members. My wife and I have done a whole lot with the cemetery. Our goal was, when I did decide to volunteer for it, to try to improve the appearance of the cemetery, and our ultimate goal was to try to get some of the monuments fixed. But we cut down a couple of dead trees. I could go on and on and on, but we did do. Yeah. I
just have a very, that was kind of a background question. So my real question that I was trying to get to is, if you have monument companies that typically are providing the monuments that get installed at graves, does that give you a list of monument companies you could call for this kind of work? Are the companies that install the monuments, do you have a list of them so that you could call them to see if they could do this work? Is that a reasonable thing to do, or is that not?
I'm sure it's reasonable, but I have never seen anything like that, sir. Where anybody has provided anything like that. Any monument company that has done anything there has. We even have a guy who lives close by that does the concrete work, does the footers if need be. So. Like I said,
as I said, I wasn't.
It's tough.
I was asking
here.
For the purpose of getting information to help me with the work I'm doing for the board.
Well, that would be great if that would have happened. But
all right. Yeah. Thank you very much, sir. That's all I have, Mark. Thank you.
All right. Does any other board members have any questions in terms of the the efforts to get 2 bids or anything else on this application?
No.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the application of North Ottawa Cemetery in Cattaraugus County for $29,152, which I think includes legal.
How you doing?
Okay.
Notice.
I'm just going to park and stand out in the crowd.
All right.
All right.
If you're, if someone needs to mute their phone, just to remind you. And while I'm making that motion, I also would include in the motion to thank the cemetery for their efforts, and I know it's hard work, so we appreciate you doing the best you can. And these are all subject to fund availability. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion is for us. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Tom, no opposed. Thank you. The motion's approved. Thank you, sir. Good luck in getting those things done. Appreciate your efforts. The next application is Elm Lawn Cemetery.
Mark,
Yes.
that's actually a typo. It's actually Elmwood. The application is correct. The agenda is wrong. It's Elmwood Cemetery.
Elmwood.
Yes.
All right. Elmwood Cemetery in Cortland County for a dangerous monuments application, the amount of $13,861. Can someone present the application to the board?
Yeah, this is Brendan Stanton with the Division of Cemeteries. We received this application from Elmwood Cemetery. It's in the town of Preble, Cortland County. I visited the cemetery and inspected the monuments and determined that the monuments that they had selected did appear hazardous. We had 2 estimates, one for $13,729 and one for $17,150. Both of them looked acceptable, and I am recommending approval of the application in the amount of $13,861.
Thank you, Brendan. Tony, do you have any comments on this application?
No concerns on this one.
Okay. Does anybody on the board have any questions or things to answer? And
No.
there being none, I'll make a motion to approve the application of Elmwood.
Yeah, no questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
I'll second it.
No questions. Okay.
I was having technical difficulties on the last one.
I made the motion to approve the application of Elmwood Cemetery in the amount of $13,861 in Cortland County, subject to fund availability. Tom seconded that. Motion before us. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion
Aye.
carries. Application is approved. The last application is from Rest Haven Cemetery in Ontario County in the amount of $47,593.41. It's a dangerous monument application. Do we have a presentation?
This is Mike Seelman again.
Mike? Go ahead.
I received the application for Rest Haven Cemetery. It's in, as you said, Ontario County, the village of Phelps. Initially, the application was for 49 monuments. I actually had to visit the cemetery 2 times to locate the monuments. And I determined that 13 of the monuments did not really appear hazardous. So I brought that information to the cemetery president and explained that I did not feel that they posed a hazard in their current position, and he concurred with that. So those 13 monuments were removed from the estimate, and the estimate was adjusted. Also, the cemetery's initial legal notice to contact the lot owners to see if they could either pay to repair their monuments or also give permission to have the monuments repaired, did not list full names. Many of them were simply last names, and they did not list lots or sections. So I asked them to rerun the ad, which they did. The second ad is listed as an exhibit to this report. They did not get a response from either ad. So having discussed this with the cemetery president, I made a recommendation that the monument, that after that all of the monuments that appear to be hazardous be approved, and I recommend approval in the amount of $47,593.41.
And they had several bids, or what was the story of the bids? Did I miss that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. They had 2 bids.
And this is the lower bid.
That is correct. After it was adjusted.
Great. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. Very thorough. Tony, do you have any questions about or issues to raise?
I did have one question for Mike. You know, the bid prices seem higher than what we're used to seeing. Was there anything in particular where there's some really large monuments or anything? I mean, it's like $1,400, $1,500 per monument, which seems to be on the high side of what we usually see. Especially for, you know, I think this is not a major city where we expect high prices.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. Many of the monuments are very large obelisks, which does increase the price. But other than that, not really. These are nothing other than the fact that there are some very large monuments.
Okay, I mean, it was more out of curiosity than, you know, a concern of, you know, approval or not approval. So
okay.
That's my only question mark.
Thank you. Any board members have any other questions on this application?
None here.
I'll make a motion to approve the application of Rest Haven Cemetery for dangerous monuments in the amount of $47,593.41, subject to fund availability. And Tom seconded it. Before us, all in favor? Aye. Application passes. Thank you all for that. We have one other matter before the board, which is an application of New Paltz Rural Cemetery for a veteran section. Louis, are you reporting on that? Who's giving the overview?
No, I'm going to I'll give a very, very 30,000-foot overview, and I'll defer to Brendan to add some more details.
You're a little bit faint away from the microphone, Louis.
Sorry. Hold on. Is that any better?
No.
How about this?
Better.
Okay, so the issue is I have to use 2 devices. My computer doesn't seem to support audio on WebEx, so I have to sit here on my phone and talk, which is annoying. Anyhow, so this has been pending for a long time. New Paltz Rural, the County of Ulster has approached New Paltz Rural. They want an easement to do some irrigation and electrical work, and essentially want to have a section within New Paltz Rural Cemetery that is reserved for veterans, for which the county would provide them. The county already has a veteran section. They're expanding it into this. They're also talking about developing a columbarium within the section. This raised a lot of legal complexities as to ownership, as to what things the county could or couldn't do, and there were a bunch of legal stumbling blocks that we kind of went back and forth on for a while. Apparently, there's an issue with county funding having an expiration date or needing to be committed by the end of March. And for that reason, we're bringing this to we're because the legal issues that we kind of come up and not been resolved. I'm not faulting anyone for it. There's no resolution to them. We have not asked for or gotten a traditional columbarium application or a major renovation application, because we didn't know for sure who was going to own the columbarium, who was going to be in charge of the section, et cetera. some of that may depend on the legal aspects of things. So we sent a summary of the sort of outstanding vanilla issues on that to the cemetery earlier this week, but they asked, and council asked, that we put this before the board for initial discussion this week, where hopefully we can expedite the process and get this approved consistent, or at least a piece of this approved consistent with the county's timing. There are actually, I see at least three separate types of approval. They don't have to be separate approvals, but three separate types of approval that are going to have to be come before us. I think the easement may very well need approval. I think we typically do review and approve material easements. I think and definitely a columbarium needs our approval, and a major alteration cemetery needs our approval. So that's kind of where we're at. Brendan, Tony, I don't know which of you want to go first in terms of anything to add. I'm going to go on mute now.
Go ahead, Brendan. Defer to you.
I don't really have anything to add that I think is particularly noteworthy, but if there are any questions that I can address based on what I know, feel free to ask.
Well, what are we being asked to approve?
Today, nothing. So the reason we did this way is the county wants to apply for funding to be able to engage in this project. They asked that a portion of this be approved at the March meeting so that they can file a timely application for funding. And I was concerned about presenting this to the board in March without and having that be the board's first time looking at it. So I thought, let's get this in front of the board just for the purpose of presentation, not for the purpose of any approval. So the board can think about it, develop questions, and hopefully we can have all questions answered at the March meeting and approve whatever the county and the cemetery need to have approved at that point. Not everything that's envisioned needs to be approved in March.
Okay.
Let me just add one more wrinkle, which is the March meeting is obviously coming up very, very soon. We've already circulated internally an entire board packet for March, which is pretty heavy. We're doing this month, it's obviously possible that we could have a special meeting later in March to just for this one as needed, if there needed approval before April 1.
Okay. Do any board members have questions of the information that's been presented?
So this is going over the planning department also. Appropriate for me to address what the county's concerns are, what the county's requests are.
Sure, Dennis, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the time. I want to thank staff for putting this on the agenda, trying to move this forward. We really appreciate that. And that's just the county's trying to do here, essentially establish cemetery. In cooperation with the cemetery. The reason we're talking about this is an easement cemetery purposes that the county will support. And the reason for that easement is effectively the county is looking at a bill of approximately $1.2 million in terms of establishing a cemetery. And in order to fund that amount, the county needs a property interest. In this past, I think this has been looked at specifically rural cemetery, essentially established or essentially in cemetery. I would think that what we're really doing here is the county has authority under Calculus Section 22 establish a different cemetery and operative cemetery. I would like to think the have to think about this as the actual county operating a different cemetery in an agreement for all the necessary maintenance privileges, burial responsibilities of the new rural cemetery. Hopefully that can answer some of the questions about planning applications for ownership lives. I know we've seen some questions from Brendan, I really thank that for doing that work. Questions about ownership agreements. The difficulty that the county has is we only improvement of being bodily improvements. And so when we start talking about the buildings and we start talking about the irrigation feature and the roadway systems, as well as the columbarium, it makes a lot of sense for the county to continue to develop to the March deadline. One of the things that we took concern is that we've invested about $140,000 in design work right now. I think the necessary process would be for getting the necessary approvals, including the state farm water design approvals. Looking at essentially a requirement by the state preservation office to do additional work, which is artificial findings to be found in our initial screening. That purpose is in the neighborhood of about $50,000 to potentially do better recovery on the site because there are Indian artifacts on the site that have to go through data recovery. It is very much concerned about the change to invest this type of money if we can't essentially move forward and establish the veteran cemetery. And we're really concerned that it's the concept of what we're trying to do is accept the as the cemetery board that would allow us to move forward, talk to the legislature about continuing to invest in funds for this stuff.
Wow. Well, Tony, do you want to, or Louis, but it sounds like that would require a sale of property. I didn't think that was what we're doing.
Right. So, and that's, Mr. Doyle, that's different from what we've talked about before.
People should mute their line if they're not speaking.
Yeah, Mr. Doyle, maybe if you would mute. Great. Okay, I think that's, whoops. Okay. It looks like you're still unmuted, Mr. Doyle. There you go. All right, let's keep it there. All right. So one of the issues, just to give the board a little bit more background, we spoke to cemetery representatives first, and then we went to the county, Brendan and I. I think Louis was on the meeting with the cemetery, but not on the meeting with the county.
I was in one of the meetings.
Yeah. So in the meeting with the cemetery, this is actually quite a large parcel of land. It's a parcel that, other than some indigenous burials that are in the back of the parcel, the cemetery really has not used. It's 99% unused. And the idea, at least from the cemetery's presentation to us, was they would allow all of it to be designated as a veteran cemetery. The county would maintain it. In fact, one of the things the county wants to do is try and get it into a condition that would meet national standards for a national cemetery. So they want to put in an irrigation system and have a very pretty lawn, whatever the standards are for that type of cemetery. That's their general goal would be. But what the cemetery wants is, because the parcel is so large, the cemetery doesn't think, even in 100 years, that the county is going to fill it up with veteran burials. And so the agreement states that if they stop conducting veteran burials, the land begins to revert back to the cemetery. They can conduct other burials. Not so much the land reverts back, but the right to bury non-veterans reverts back to the cemetery. So under that scenario, title would stay in the cemetery and the easement reduces as the use of the land for veteran burials dissipates. The idea of selling the land is a very different scenario. And if the cemetery and the county think that's a preferred way, I'm sure there's a way to do that and have the land revert back, even though there's a sale of land. And the board could probably, we need appraisals first of all. That's the complicating thing of a sale of land, is you have to show that the cemetery is getting fair market value. Now, the fact that the cemetery would be getting the burial fees, that's part of this agreement, is all the monies for the veteran burials goes to the cemetery, not to the county. So whether title's in the cemetery or title's in the county, it's the cemetery getting the money every time there's a burial or a lot sale. So that, you know, there's a lot of complications there. I think an easement without a transfer of title works better. If the county can find a way to have that and achieve bonding, that would be helpful, I think. As far as ownership of the structures, that my understanding is there's two structures. And Mr. Doyle, maybe you can clarify. I know one of them's a mausoleum. The other one was like an amphitheater or something. Could you maybe go ahead, Mr. Doyle?
Sure. There is a ceremonial facility that's proposed that they could hold better events on. That's a large structure at the back of the cemetery. There are multiple barriers that would be needed with respect to that. And just to get the structure addressed. So understanding that even if we're seeing these for cemetery purposes, it's not unusual for us to sleep rather than say, oh, these people over there. We're hoping that we can recognize that would give the county the right to operate a cemetery on that property while maintaining the reversionary rights to the rural cemetery. It would fail to essentially meet our obligation under the easement of the agreement.
I guess I have a question then. If you're saying, if you're saying that the county is going to operate the cemetery, I mean, who's going to be cutting the grass? Who's going to be doing the interments? Who's going to be maintaining the deed book? Who's going to be those sort of numbers? Are you going to come in and have your own guys do that within the cemetery?
This is John Simonson. I'm a member of the New Paltz Rural Cemetery Board. I'm also a lawyer in New Paltz, and I believe Sue Stagen, our president, is on with us as well. This was not designed to be a transfer of ownership, although I think what Mr. Doyle is doing is he's suggesting that that may be an option, but that wasn't what we discussed. What we discussed was the transfer of an easement. The county undertook to perform the maintenance of the grounds for the veterans section in order to maintain it up to national cemetery standards. But at all times, the burials were to be performed by the Cemetery Association. We would maintain the records of the graves. The sale of the plots would be through the cemetery. The only thing that the county was doing was, number one, providing a roadway around the veterans section. The infrastructure, including water pipes and irrigation, and the construction of columbaria and the ceremonial structure. It's kind of in the center of the area. All other responsibilities would be the responsibility of the cemetery. So that was our original plan. And Dennis, you can chime in if that was not your understanding, but I think it was.
But that's correct, and we would love to go forward on that basis. I think we're really trying to ask the board or commission to understand that with respect to the cemetery, our ability to operate a cemetery, we're trying to do this in conjunction and cooperation with the New Paltz Cemetery, and not just restrict the land so we won't be able to have a property interest.
Right. The idea here was that the county at any time lost the political or financial ability to continue to fund veteran burials, that the cemetery would have the ability to say, all right, the easement over or the exclusivity of using the land for veteran burials ends. And now the public again can use the unused portions. The veteran section, the burials that were there will always remain, but then the land that's not used would revert back for public use. And if the county stopped performing maintenance at all times, it would be the responsibility of the cemetery association to maintain the property. We never relinquish that, and it's always under the cemetery's auspices that the maintenance would be done.
So let me chime in again. A lot of what you both have said is very helpful to getting this approved, because one of the issues is this agreement between the cemetery and the county a management agreement? If it is, that's a no-no, because only a cemetery can manage a cemetery. Right. If it's just a service agreement where the county's providing a service and it's installing things, but it's not managing that lot, all burials are managed by the cemetery, that's okay. There's a non-cemetery can provide service, an accounting firm provides a service to cemeteries. This is just, this would be a service agreement, or it can even have 2 or 3 different services, as long as, the accumulation of services doesn't become management, because they're so involved in it. So from what you've described, I think we can make it clear that the county is providing services, it isn't managing the cemetery. And hopefully, Mr. Doyle, that terminology would not offend what you're trying to do as far as obtaining.
But my first answer is if that works for you, then it certainly works for us, with one caveat. Be able to bond the improvement, and we can't bond improvements that I don't own.
Okay, so that's, as far as the ceremonial structure, I don't think we have a problem of the county owning that. And if ever the county ever stopped servicing this property and the cemetery itself took over full service of the property, I'm sure we could deal with the title to that structure. The trickier is the mausoleum. So the rule is only a cemetery can sell burial lots unless you're a burial society. That's the only exception. That rule extends to mausoleums. A family can buy a private mausoleum and bury their family in that private mausoleum. An individual family, nobody can buy a mausoleum and install a mausoleum in a cemetery and then make those spaces in the mausoleum available to the public. Only a cemetery can do that. So title to the mausoleum is tricky here because if it's the county that owns the mausoleum and now the county is selling space in the mausoleum to the public, even if it's restricted to veterans, members of the public, that could be in conflict with the restriction on public versus private mausoleums. So if there's a way to keep title to the mausoleums in the cemetery, but still get you your funding that you need, we have to find that way. We may have to find that way. And that's the tricky part of it in this.
So, and that's really helpful to us. I think that from an investment purposes, mausoleums are not part of an investment. Things will smooth through the board and through the new board as well. You can have that discussion. Certainly we need to consider. I'm trying to look at the basic extent that the county has the authority to operate in the cemetery under that section of law. Actually reversing it, basically, so the county operating the cemetery, we have service who prevent its operation. But that doesn't work. And you think it's a lot easier to see that way. I think we can see that the idea will have from the column, and we can think how to do that. You have to operate to a certain extent.
Okay. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, hopefully the board feels the same way. My impression is this is a great proposal. It's great for the cemetery. It's great for the county. It's great for the veterans who are going to make use of this facility. If we can find a way to do this, it's a win-win. And, before I continue, let me see if anyone on the board has any questions or comments on any of this so far.
Hi, this is Jill. Question, and I apologize if one of you has gone over this already, and I didn't hear it. But in terms of the purchase of land, are we talking about just an easement, or is there? It's just the easement.
Just
Okay.
an easement, correct.
Okay.
That's the way it's currently structured. Dennis just kind of threw me a curveball by suggesting something different.
Okay.
But the way it's structured right now, it's just an easement.
We don't throw the curveball. We won't keep the exact thing we're talking about.
Okay, it's just an easement, and it's subject to easement or termination as to the land that's not already being used for burial.
Got it.
If burial takes place, it's forever. But any land that's not used for burials, if the county loses the funding or political will to continue to use the veterans section that it's reserved, it reverts back to the cemetery. The only thing the county is going to do is fund it, fund the burials, and maintain the grounds as long as they choose to do so up to that national standard.
Okay, that's helpful. And I think I was misunderstanding I think what Mr. Doyle said confused me a little bit, because my understanding from reviewing the documents was pretty much exactly what you described. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding it accurately. Thank you.
I think Dennis has the problem that in order to fund the improvements to begin with, they have to have some sort of legal right to the property. That's where the easement comes in.
Right.
And if I can add to that, I think the easement can be thought of in multiple ways. One is kind of a utility easement. They're going in and installing things underground, just like a utility would. And they're going to own those things that they're installing underground. It's mostly the water irrigation. There might be some electrical as well. And then there's the easement to allow them to go in and do this maintenance operation, signage, the installation of the other stuff. Those are major alterations. We'll deal with those as they come up, as the time to install comes up. But so those are the levels of easement that I think we're talking about.
But there's no sale such that we would need appraisals. I think that's what I wanted to become, because that's a whole nother bucket that, but that's not happening.
Yeah, you and I are on the same page on that. I think Mr. Simonson is too.
You see, the benefit, in addition to honoring our veterans, which is a wonderful thing to do, the benefit to the cemetery is that the county is funding burials throughout Ulster County, which provides the cemetery with a cash flow, which in this economic time is very welcome.
Yeah.
And it's helping to maintain the rest of the cemetery. So it's supplementing that. So it's a win-win for us, and I think for the county as well.
So based on what I'm hearing, I think if we can hopefully get it together quickly, what we would want to present in a week or two, whenever the March meeting is the easement and the agreement under which the county would go in and do the installations and have the right to go in to install the columbariums. And the other thing, even though those would still have to come back as a major alteration as the time comes close to actually do the installation. But their rights to have that contract that they're going to service this property, it'll be a service agreement, not a management agreement, and the right to the easement I think that's, from what I'm hearing, is everything that the county needs to do what it needs to do. And I think that limiting it to that makes it easier for you guys, you folks, the board, to approve it in March.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, assuming that any approvals that are, required, those are in place so that we don't have to make any, decision subject to getting whatever municipal, environmental, whatever, we need to approve, to the extent that we have those approvals to review, would be good.
Yeah, so there is some language cleanup we'll have to do, because I did notice that there are documents that refer to selling the land to the county. That's got to be removed. It's got to, so John and I and Mr. Doyle will have to go through all the documents that are going to be presented in March and make sure we all agree on the language that's in there. And hopefully have something ready to be approved. I'll only add, they actually have had a veterans section operating in their main cemetery. It was very loosely done, nothing near the formality of what they're proposing here. They pretty much used up the space that they had designated for that. That's why they're going into this new space, and they're expanding the scope of the idea, which is why this is so much bigger than what they've been doing before.
Correct.
Well, I think all of you lawyers go away and come back with an answer.
Fair enough.
Certainly, as long as the cemetery and the county, are in agreement about what they want to, how they want to do it, we certainly, want to be able to move expeditiously so that you can get your goals met. So hopefully we can either bring it back on the 9th or if we have to have a special meeting, we certainly would be glad to do that. Does anybody else have any other questions for rural cemetery or the county?
No, this was really helpful, though.
It's very helpful to us. I want to thank the board, the department staff, and cemetery. It's been very collaborative, really good, and we want to keep that moving forward.
I agree, Dennis.
Great.
I was just curious if Tony or Lewis has any example of something similar to this in the history of the division or the board. Any kind of arrangement that we could use as a template for moving forward?
Mike, can you think of anything? I can't.
Yeah, I don't remember anything like this in my 13 years of doing this. It's unique, but in a good way.
Yeah, conceptually.
There are certainly cemeteries that have veteran sections, but I think those are all completely private. The ones
Okay, thank you. Just curious. Thank you.
The collaborative approach, and to the degree that it helps this cemetery, that's great too. So now, I think that ends our agenda, but I suspect, Tony, do we still have to that we should have a public opportunity for the public to speak? Is that part of a regular?
Yeah, I think that'd be appropriate.
Okay. So the next meeting, by the way, is our regular meeting is March 9th. Is that right? At 10:30 on March 9th?
Correct.
Correct.
And I'll now give anyone who wishes to speak to the board on these matters or any other matter an opportunity to speak. If you're a lobbyist, we appreciate if you identify yourself. If you're a lobbyist, you have to. So is there anybody who'd like to speak to the board? David, you're supposed to use that chat function.
I know, but I'm sorry, I'm too old.
I'm kidding. I wouldn't even say.
Good afternoon, David Fleming from the New York State Association of Cemeteries. This was a great conversation that we just heard. I would like to remind folks, many of you were not here back in the days when I actually had brown hair, and we passed a law in New York that permits counties, towns, and cemeteries to apply for federal funding under a specific designation within the I forgot which law that is. It's the Military and Naval Affairs Law, whatever that's called, to apply for federal funding to do something similar to this. So I think there might be additional funding opportunities to New Paltz to go to the feds for some of the other work that will be done that may not be covered under the state funding. And I'm happy to share that with you, Mr. Simonson, at some point, if you'd like me to do that. I think that's just, Mr. Chairman, it's a great model. I think that's what NYSAC has encouraged for a long time. Instead of creating cemeteries that are funded by other governments at the detriment of New York's regulated cemeteries, allowing co-location where cemeteries have, existing nonprofit cemeteries have an abundance of land, have the services and the facilities for our veterans. So I just want to bring that to everyone's attention. That was a long time ago. And to your previous comment, I don't think it has been utilized. And I don't think anything like this, at least in the 20-some years I've been doing it. And then just to quickly touch on, Mr. Malillo was asking some questions earlier about a gentleman about monument repair. Just my own experience with our members in upstate and some parts of other parts of New York, we see with the change in business models that many of the monument dealers that are doing monuments in cemeteries now are not actually doing the foundations themselves. They're subbing that out to people who specialize. And if you've been to a cemetery recently, as I know many of you have, the monuments are pretty standardized as far as the work that's done. So the equipment necessary to do an obelisk or some really massive monument may not be in the inventory of the local monument dealer because they're not used to dealing with the type of replacement or repair. They're dealing with smaller monuments, and they may just be setting them and they're not doing repairs. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. We're seeing more and more folks who are specializing in different aspects of monument, either restoration or installation. And I think that's one of the reasons, as the board's struggling with regulations and trying to figure out how to deal with this lack of bidders, is that it's been segmented in a way that it's hard to get people who are going to give you a full bid on doing the work. And many of our nonprofit cemeteries are not in the position to be general contractors to figure out how to put all these bids together to get the monuments repaired. So sorry to take up so much time, but I just want to pass that along for your information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. And even though it is 4:58 on a Friday afternoon, your comments are always appreciated and welcome.
Thank you.
It's 3:58.
Anyway, okay, so I think that is the end of our agenda. Is there anything else anybody needs to bring up or talk about? If not, I'll make a motion.
I actually have a quick question for the New Paltz rural/county folks. If we are not, and I'm looking at what we have on for the 9th, I think it's extremely unlikely we can have this back on by then. If we're not doing that, what's your sort of drop dead date for when you want us to have this meeting so I can try to schedule it?
Mr. Doyle, do you have a date you need to have approvals from us?
Sooner rather than later, what I'm really looking for is to make sure that we have a solid way forward. And that committed funding that the archaeological review.
If we were to
commit money without indication that we're going to have approval of the Secretary Board. I think we're at least having a principle of how all the data.
Louis, can I make a suggestion that if we can't get this ready by March 9, can we just adjourn the March meeting a week, or however long it takes to put this on with everything else in March?
No, we cannot. Because we have a hard deadline for the vandalism fund applications for March that will miss. What we could do, if we're having 2 meetings in March, is devote the March 9th meeting only to vandalism applications, and then have a meeting on, say, 2 weeks later, March 23rd, that covers the substantive applications, including this one. That we could do.
Well, Tom, Jill, I tried.
Well, we have, some competing priorities. We do certainly want to get as many of the vandalism applications through the fiscal offices as we can for maximizing our appropriation. And of course, we also want to make sure we are responsive to this issue. So I'm sure that we'll do our best as board members, as a board, to be able to devote the time we need to do it. So thank you, Tony, for your efforts. But again, we'll do our best. If there are no other questions or comments, and I'm not rushing anybody, I really appreciate your time on this special meeting and on a Friday afternoon. So I'll make a motion to adjourn. And I don't know if I ever got all the board members introduced, but you're all well known. So let's just have a second on the motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Second.
Okay, thank you all. Have a great weekend. Motion to adjourn. Bye.